A very good morning to Mr. Nico Kleynhans. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Good morning to you and also to the listeners.
So, Nico, you said that you would like to award Bravery Awards, give Bravery Awards to tax practitioners. Why?
Well, confession first, I once worked for SARS
Oh, wow.
for 8 weeks. And then by mutual agreement, I thought it would be better just to go and do an accounting course at university instead.
Okay.
So I kind of had a look of what it looked like inside. And today I spend a couple of hours a day communicating with SARS. And I think we do deserve Bravery Awards.
True story.
I really believe. So let's look at some emails I got from listeners in the past weeks. Dear Nico, I left South Africa 20 years ago. And while out of the country, I left my home here, rented it out, and received an income. I never communicated with SARS.
Ooh.
And now, since I no longer lived in the country, now I want to return. And not only do I want to return, I want to spend just on 4 odd million rand buying a second home.
Mm.
What should I tell SARS?
Okay. So the person leaves the country some 20 years ago, and because they're not living in South Africa, they feel like, well, why do I have to communicate with SARS?
Yes, so they just ignore SARS.
Okay.
Well, the first thing this person better do is to find a tax practitioner and say, hi, SARS, I'm back.
Okay.
Because now there are going to be issues. What this person didn't understand is that where you put your feet at night does not decide with which tax authority you have to communicate.
Okay.
Over the last 20 years, that rule has changed 3 or 4 times. And because he hasn't communicated that, for some of that 20-year period, he's going to be in trouble. And for other parts of the 20-year period, he's not going to be in trouble.
Okay.
But whatever happens, he's going to have to make a number of disclosures. He's going to need quite a lot of help to get through all of that. And then he's going to have to be really nice to his tax practitioner because the penalties are now have accumulated to many, many thousands of rand.
Ooh.
And there are ways that you can get those penalties waived if this is the first time that the taxpayer has got into trouble.
Okay.
So it can be sorted out, but it's going to be a challenge and it's going to be fairly expensive.
Okay.
Both in terms of taxes and in terms of the amount of work. Because the rule today is, if you leave South Africa, you are still obliged to make submissions to SARS for a period of time. You can't say, because I've left, therefore I'm no longer responsible to communicate with SARS.
Okay.
And especially if you have property here, you're going to then get into trouble because the various tax authorities around the world talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a South African phone number and you're sitting in United Kingdom, the UK tax authorities know that you should be talking to SARS and to them, and they will tell SARS, and so they will still know where you are.
Okay.
So you need to keep in touch with your tax authority here.
Very important.
Second question, and this is where I hate HR people.
Human resource people.
That's right. Nico, I want to resign from my job. I have debt around 600,000.
Ooh.
I've spoken to my HR. They said I can draw out 600,000 from my pension fund and I can then settle my debt. That is not true. Because what the HR didn't tell you is that in your lifetime, you can draw 500,000 rand. Every time you leave your job, you can take some money on which no tax will be payable. But SARS remembers how much you've taken from your first job 45 years ago.
Yeah.
So by the time she's reached retirement age now, she's changed jobs 2 or 3 times. So she does not have 500,000 free of tax due to her. And so there was an argument because she said, but HR said, and I'm saying, well, if HR says that, make them put that in writing so that when SARS hits you with that tax bill, you can try and recover the cost from a person who is not qualified to give you tax advice.
Oh, good point.
And is now giving you tax advice. So it turns out I was right, because SARS would have taken 48,000 rand of her 600,000 just to settle the lump sum tax that needs to be paid. In addition to that, she still owes SARS money from previous tax years. So SARS is not only going to take the 48,000, they're also going to take from her money the tax that she still owes them. And now you have a problem. She's leaving, hoping she's going to end up with 600,000 in a bank. And it could be that she only ends up with 500,000 in a bank. So again, especially those listeners who are retiring, you need to talk to your tax practitioner a couple of weeks before you get to that decision, because they've got to do quite a lot of work and alert you to what it is you're going to have to pay, so that you don't end up having now retired. You've cashed in the only cash you're going to be able to take, and it's not enough to do what you wanted to do.
Sure, very important.
Then there are times when SARS does stupid things. This time, my email is to SARS. Dear SARS, you said Mrs. X could not claim her medical aid expenses because the ID on her medical aid does not respond to the ID you have on your computer.
Okay.
Please find enclosed a copy of her ID, a copy of the ID the medical aid has, and it is exactly the same. I have no idea why you have a different ID. And so that thing delayed her getting her refund. And of course, it was a mistake on SARS's part. So she got
her refund.
And then something that affects a couple of thousand of you and happened in the past month. When you paid your taxes that were due, you got a message from SARS saying there are penalties because you paid late. And to this one, my email was, Dear SARS, you said Mr. X paid his taxes late. Here is proof that he paid within the deadline.
Yeah.
Why are you claiming it was late? Their response, oops, it was a mistake. And so a couple of thousand of taxpayers got those penalty notices because of an administrative error,
on
and
SARS
they should
side.
not have paid.
Jeez.
And hopefully your tax practitioner would have picked that up and will check whether that really is the case, in which case that refund needs to be given to you. And if you were late, then I'm sorry that your tax practitioner is going to be cross with me, because they may have had 30 or 40 phone calls thinking that everybody who got the tax penalties, it was a mistake. It's not a mistake every time.
Yeah, true.
So there are some things that people also complain to me about. They say my tax practitioner charges 450 rand an hour. Now, what you need to understand, you're not buying your tax practitioner's time. You're buying the knowledge the tax practitioner has built up over 20 and 30 years. When you go to a medical specialist, you can't say to that specialist, why are you charging me 600 rand for 20 minutes? You're not buying the specialist's time, you're buying their knowledge.
Yeah.
And so if you are finding your tax practitioner expensive, that is an opinion that you have because you don't understand how much work they have. I have had people complain that they are 20 years behind on their taxes and the tax practitioner wants 20,000 rand to do the paperwork. They're getting a bargain
That's
because
true.
it's a lot of work that tax practitioner has to do. So where are the keys that are important? You can't sit down with your tax practitioner a day before the taxes have got to be paid, have a 20-minute conversation and hope you're going to come out of that with tax advice. That's the wrong term. The other issue is when you go to your tax practitioner a day before the deadline and you take 2 shopping bags full of cash slips, don't be surprised if they tell you they are not going to be able to do the analysis in time because you're not the only client. And then lastly, somebody sent me an email, and I thought this was funny actually. Dear Nico, I must have my weekly massages. I can't live without them. Will SARS allow me to write this off against my tax? No, madam, they are not going to allow you to write off your massage cost against income tax.
Nico, thank you so much. And I agree. Tax practitioners definitely deserve Bravery Awards. Thank you so much for highlighting those elements for us this morning. And we really appreciate your time.